A hill that I am happy to die on is that if you're starting a technology business, you need to build an actual product, i.e. you need to build that version 1 MVP. And there are plenty of people out there who will tell you that you don't need to build an actual product. There are two types of people that engage in this behavior. The most vocal people in this regard are trying to sell you something. Counterintuitively, they are ultimately trying to sell you a service where they build your version 1 MVP, and it's easier to do that if you haven't already built one. The other set of people are those who are struggling with the problem that having to build your product is highly inconvenient if you don't have any money, because building a software product does cost money, and typically a lot of money. By convincing yourself that you don't need it, you don't have to deal with the fact that you don't have the money yet. The alternative, those people will tell you, is to sell a sort of strung together mock-up of what your product might ultimately do when it does get built properly. Often cited here as using Google Docs or Airtable Forms or other off-the-shelf cloud services backed up with manual processes. The reason why this is appealing is that stringing something together costs you maybe £50 a month plus however much labour you can put in, as opposed to £50,000 in cold hard cash. And I've struggled to explain to non-technology people why this is all backwards and broken, but I've had a brainwave and I think I've come up with a semi-tortured analogy to explain why it's all backwards and broken. And fundamentally, you are going to need to find some money to build your MVP, or find someone who can build it and bring them into your business as a co-founder. Ultimately, the path to building a technology business requires you having a baseline product that you can parlay up into a proper business. This baseline product is virtually always called an MVP, or minimum viable product. But my use of the term baseline here is that you have to think of this as something that you build upon. It is a foundational piece of work. An MVP is not a disposable commodity. It's a real thing that sits at the kernel of your new venture and you grow it. And again, people will tell you that the MVP isn't important, will try and convince you that the MVP should be disposable. So you either use that baseline product and play a game where you slowly and incrementally build up an income stream around it, or you use that baseline product to convince one or more angel investors to dump a whole load of cash into your business and accelerate that process of finding product market fit and building a business. You can look at either of these routes as being essentially about investment. You can either have a collection of relatively distant customers who are taking a kind of wait and see, we'll give it a go approach with your business and slowly dripping in cash that you reinvest, or you can have 2 or 3 more closely connected angel investors that are putting in larger gobs of cash up front. Either way, you need to have a convincing basis for investment, and that is the crux of the issue. Stringing together some sort of quasi-manual process backed by things like Google Docs isn't terribly convincing. So now on to my thought experiment. This thought experiment involves thinking about an idea that you likely don't know anything about, but with a little intuition you can see both sides of how it might be done, the founder's side and the investor's side. Imagine that you have a talent for making hot sauces, and I don't know, you might have a talent for making hot sauces. If you do, drop me a comment, love to try some. You take some chilies and some other stuff like vinegar, salt, fruit and veg and all the stuff that goes into making a hot sauce, and you make it and you enjoy it and your friends enjoy it, and one day you have this brainwave and you think, it is time to go into the hot sauce making business. I'm going to sell this stuff and change the world. What do you need to do to get from saucepan, food processor and random happenstance to an actual investable business? The reason why this thought experiment works is that most people haven't tried to create hot sauce businesses, but will intuitively know there are a bunch of complicated and expensive steps that need to be done in order to do so. To create an investable hot sauce business, you have to convince an investor that you are able to get bottles of hot sauce in quantity onto a shelf of a supermarket. And we'll kind of ignore the direct-to-consumer bit here. We're just, whatever, same idea, you got to ship these things at scale. Because if you have anything less than that, i.e. that someone can walk into a supermarket and buy their product or go online and buy it from a online shop, all you have is some recipes in a notebook and some hopes and dreams. And why would anybody invest in that? So we can bullet out the big parts of the process that enables you to get bottles of your hot sauce into the hands of your customers in meaningful numbers, i.e. you need to be able to do formal recipe development, sourcing ingredients in bulk, computer systems for stock keeping, ingredients tracing, sourcing bottles, machines and processes for sterilizing and packaging bottles or jars, machines and processes to affix and seal caps or lids, a metric ton of every type of insurance under the sun, food standards agency accreditation or whatever compliance steps are required in your area, premises in which to operate a food factory, fitting out an industrial kitchen for bulk food manufacture, staff along with hygiene training and related processes, label design and production, complaints and returns, branding. Realistically, in a market like this, creating differentiated branding and operating a marketing strategy is half the business. You know, half of your staff will spend half their working lives on TikTok. Enough traction from whatever channel you're selling into to demonstrate proper market access, e.g. Tesco or Waitrose or whoever are happy to carry the stuff, need to be able to produce a piece of paper or an email saying, we're going to carry this stuff. This is the minimum viable product for a hot sauce business. And I would caveat by saying that I'm a rank amateur in this regard, but I do happen to have an ex-wife who went far enough down the road of selling their own hot sauces for me to know roughly what the moving parts are. Like, I've done some research into this, but I certainly am nowhere near actually how you would actually do it. However, any investor in your hot sauce business needs to see that you mostly have a solution to all of these points, even if you've not sold a single bottle yet. Because why on earth would they invest if you haven't done all of this work? You would not have de-risked or understood the key components well enough to guarantee growth against that investment. What, for example, you can never get the cost-effective insurance that you need and never get past Morrison's supplier due diligence as a result? What if you can't afford the deposit on rent for the premises? What if you can't afford the fit out of the kitchen? An investor will not touch this without all the work being done. Without doing that work, you just have, as I said before, a recipe book and some dreams. So why do people tell founders that you can create a technology business without doing the equivalent of all this deep work? The advantage of this thought experiment is that physically you can see it. Like, we know when we hold a bottle of hot sauce in our hands, we know there's a lot of work that's gone into that. We know there are very high standards of hygiene in food production, and that conjures images of staff in hairnets and white coats and gleaming aluminium and machinery and nice clean cardboard boxes we're packaging things up in. You know, we can see it. But when looking at building software products, we get hamstrung by that lack of physicality. Building software is very much like building castles in the sky with your mind. We all know what software looks like when we use it, but we can't see the steps that goes into its production in the same way. Even people who spend their life building software, in our minds, it doesn't look like what things the rest of the world look like. And to be completely frank with you, I understand how software works way better than I understand how people work. The conceptualization of those worlds is really, really different. This results in it being very easy for non-technology people to be drawn into abbreviation. Like, by comparison, if someone tries to tell you that when building your hot sauce business, you don't need to sterilize the bottles that you bought from China, you kind of intuitively know that's bogus. You know that won't work, but you don't have the equivalent when you're thinking about software. Of the roughly 15 things I bulleted out before that we need to think about when creating a hot sauce business, how many of those were free or cheap? Sure, some of those items are easier than others, and some are very obviously expensive. Creating software product has the same complexity as building a hot sauce business, for example. But again, we have this problem with the fact that it's very ineffable, and it's easy to assume that the list of steps that we need to go through aren't difficult or complicated or can be skipped. And this is where people get sucked in, because they effectively get told, you don't need to worry about all these steps because you don't really understand what losing those steps means. What's happening when someone is saying you can just string together some rough approximation of what the software is supposed to do, what they're really saying is, you have some recipes and we're pretty sure we can get them on the shelf at Morrison's, i.e. it is all hopes and dreams, unless you actually put in the graft to sweat out building the actual product. So next time someone is trying to convince you that you don't need to build some real product to build a technology business, ask yourself if they would try and convince you that you don't need a real product to build any other type of business, and that should give you the answer. So to be clear, you need to build your product and you need to find the money with which to do so. So let me tell you a secret. I have something called the VIP program, or the Very Important Founder program. There's a link in my bio where you can go and sign up. And when you do, you get access to free training, ebooks, checklists, exclusive content, all manner of resources that help you as a non-technology founder start and grow your technology business. Why don't you nip over to my bio, follow the link, sign up, and I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.